because he asked a question which I thought maybe I'll answer tonight for some of you people. He wanted to know what, he wasn't sure what it meant to extract significance in the situation. And we call one measure of intelligence, using it in quotes, of course, is the ability to extract significance. Now, here's what that means. It means if you're hunting for water, that everything related to that project would be significant. How to find where water is and how to indicate probable areas of the land where you will find water. And that would be significant. We're talking about the weather, what in relation to that problem. And when a person is very ill, if you could recommend methods of relieving pain or finding some solution or temporary solution to the illness, that would be significant. But my brother has the same illness, is not significant, it's not related. And when people say, oh, that's a beautiful painting or a beautiful picture, that isn't very significant. But a very significant thing would be if you used a certain type of pastel, you might be able to get the effect. Might be able to strengthen the effect that you're looking for. You see what I mean? Something you can use. In other words, you know how they keep their water cool on the desert? Does anybody remember in the early days? They used to put it in kind of a sack in which the outside lost some water, a very small quantity, to evaporation, and that kept the water cool. That would be significant. Or if you're stranded on an island, it'd be good to have a magnifying glass for starting fires. Matches get wet. That would be very significant. And if you have eyeglasses, perhaps like John's, you can start a fire. The lenses have to be very thick. And they are thick, aren't they, John?
Yes, they are.
Okay. You can start a fire with that. And so that would be significant. And so most of our lives are not spent significantly because we're not trained to. And we don't pay much attention to that because our society emphasizes particular things, like certain types of music, which is not significant in relation to people. When you think of all the years a guy like Yehudi Menuhin put in playing the violin, if you put the same time in on hunger in the world, solving the problem, it would be much more significant. Now, is it significant to please people? What about the pleasure one gets from looking at a beautiful scene or listening to great music? Well, if people are productive and listen to great music, that's okay. But if they're not productive and listen to great music, it is not significant. A lot of people felt that what is lacking in the world today is culture, exposure to culture. Well, Europe has had a great deal of culture and a great deal of shit. The French have had culture for years, and they're miserable people. Miserable in terms of significance. So what we're trying to emphasize here is the significance of the methods of science for a method involving our lifestyle. If we can arrange our lifestyle around the scientific method, I think that degrees of happiness can be installed in the process of raising people that way. We think that the danger areas lie in poetry, music, art, and theater, and all of the arts would be dangerous because unless they are social, unless the art has a message or some meaning. If you go to a movie or theater and see a film, when you walk out, you're that much wiser. You can handle things better. You find some tools for living and relating with people. I would say that would be significant. There are very few significant plays. I think that a significant play would have to spell out in the end of the play just what the problem is, because it seems that the audience can't put it together. If you do a movie like The Grapes of Wrath, if you don't put it together for the audience, tell them what's happening, they walk out and say it was a good movie, let's have some clam chowder. they don't seem to put it together in any useful way. And it seems that in attending these lectures, you will learn a great deal, but if you don't put it to use, if you don't practice putting it to use, then it doesn't work for you. Just like art. If you don't work at it, if you don't study and improve, then it doesn't really work for you. And if you, in the arts, if you make a poor drawing or a poor showing, you don't know what's wrong with it. Not always. You don't know what's the matter with it. And whereas in technology, there's a difference. And we would like to get that. We think that technological thinking can fit in with the arts. And I'll show you what might happen. And I'll try to tell you what I mean by technological thinking. All right? I gotta go back in time. This is kind of a simplified drawing of the coach. And these have very worn springs on the thing. And every time you went over a bump, the coach was very high. It used to oscillate side to side and up and down and move a lot. And people were not too comfortable. Before the springs, they were less comfortable. And so later they learned to work it out so the wheels do most of the moving and the body doesn't move too much. That would be significant. And what happened then, as the years went by, in the automotive area, when cars got very big, it was hard to turn them, so they put in power steering. So a little 79-pound weakling can operate a car, turn the wheel. And the same with big trucks and big airplanes. Big airplanes, you couldn't work the controls. It was just too much. And you couldn't feel the air pressure, so they put in boosters. And it's so easy to work the controls on these big planes. That would be significant. Okay. Now I'll show you a problem and how significance is used. Let's assume that one of the wings began to vibrate like mad on an airplane, and the vibration was transferred, and then the wing snapped off. What the technicians do is they try to find out what the hell is going on. They ask that question, what the hell is going on? What makes it vibrate? And they get no answers when they ask that question. Asking a question is the first part of it. What's going on? The second part of it is I haven't the slightest idea. How do you find out? I don't know. Let's see. So what they do is they mechanically did something like this. I'm trying to give you a picture of what they did. Inside the hangar, this is supposed to be a front view of an airplane, they took a little motor and put it here and connected, they had a wheel on the motor and a rod connected to the wingtip. And every time that motor went around, it would shake the wingtip, move it up and down like that. And they watch how that vibration was transferred. And they speed it up, slow it down, and move that in so it's shorter or slower until the whole plane was shaking, the tail and everything else. And they began to make notes at what particular frequency the vibration traveled through the whole plane. Then they found that out. And they found out how to dampen that transfer of vibration. They found out how to do that. And then they got rid of it. They essentially got rid of it. Now, sometimes they find that young kids, at least today I've read an article, I think it was several months ago, they begin to see evidence of hardening of the arteries in very young children at that early stage. I'm talking about 5 and 6 years old. And so when you see that, it may be shocking, but if you do nothing about it, it's not significant. And you say, well, what the hell do I know about hardening of the arteries? I can't do anything about it. No one else knows anything about it. And this is what you got to remember. Doctors don't know very much about it. And doctors, if you've ever watched them work in surgery, are not so delicate. It isn't always a delicate thing. It's pretty crude sometimes. They really hack away and hammer away and shove away. It is really anybody ever watched surgery, major surgery? It's really rough. I'm not talking about brain surgery or eye surgery. That's pretty delicate. So when you ask the question, what's going on? Why am I unhappy? And people ask that question all the time, and they think they're dealing with a problem. Why don't I get along with people? Why don't people like me? Why doesn't George phone me? You know, we keep asking the same question up and back. Now, if you pick up the phone and say, hey, George, why don't you phone me? George doesn't usually tell you why he doesn't phone you. And so George doesn't tell you why he doesn't go out with you or what it is. And so we don't know. and we wonder, well, what the hell, maybe we ought to use Chanel number 5. And that would be not significant. And the non-significant systems, such as, you know, what if you use this toothpaste, certain kind of mouthwash, which may not be ultimately significant. And so we're going to try to find out tonight what significance would be in human relations, because this is where the major problems are. In human relations, most human beings evolve a lifestyle from the culture, from their background. They evolve a lifestyle. And their lifestyle, especially if they're loners, they evolve a lifestyle that's unique to their style of living. And when they live with somebody else, the lifestyles, in the very early stages, people will yield. Well, sure, I'll let you have your way. Then as you get to know each other, then the lifestyles overlap. That is, you know, I don't mind your painting, but leaving them on my bed, you know, with your oils and all that goddamn shit, you know, I begin to get angry. I'm going to move your goddamn stuff. You say, what about your shirts lying all over you? You know, and then we get at each other. And then we find that, as we get through screaming at each other, we find that we're apart. And then we find that there's something missing in the relationship. So we call each other. You know, I didn't mean what I said last Saturday. And you say, neither did I, and all that. And then you're friendly again. So the lifestyles overlap. And so what people have to learn is really not to try to get along with another person, but see whether or not you can live with different lifestyles. Now, what does getting along mean? The recognition of the difference in lifestyles. And if you can live with that, fine. And if you can't live with that, you announce the fact that you can't. You can't relate with your mother in certain areas, and you can try like hell, and the effort that you have to put out to get along in such small areas is hardly worth it. So you let go. But if you're brought up in a churchy environment, you feel, my God, I've neglected my mother. And you can't get along with your mother. It says you must. After all, she is your mother. So you got nothing but problems. The problems cannot be resolved. There's certain types of problems that can't be resolved. So you let them go. Let's assume that I was born with an ass that dragged on the ground when I walked. That's where I was born. Both cheeks would drag on the ground. Now I must remember that people would find that unusual, to say the least. They would stop and look and poke each other in the ribs and wink, you know. And so they might even call you drag ass. And that would be within what the people in this culture would do. And so you have to drag your ass through town. Now, and accept that, or else stay at home. Or else put roller skates on your ass so it doesn't drag. And people are not going to appreciate that. And so you live in a world that's pretty sick. And so any adjustments that you make to people are really not going to add anything to your life, because it's an artificial thing to make an adjustment. Whatever your patterns are, I'll use you, Karen, whatever your patterns are, they are. And if you say, geez, I got to change those patterns, why do you want to change it? Because somebody said you've got to change it? If you like the style, live with it. But if you need approval from other people, if you need that pat on the back, then you must surrender your lifestyle to get it. You will be accepted by people, but you'll be very lonely, and you'll lose your identity. You feel alive when you do what you must do, whether it's painting on a boat or living in a trailer and camping outdoors. If this is what you must do, and your boyfriend says outdoors, sleeping in his sleeping bag, that's his problem, not yours. And so to learn to be able to do that, and learn not to argue with others. Why don't you try it? You just sit here criticizing, but you don't try. Don't do that. Leave it alone. Forget it. And here we wrestle with each other. Finally, sometimes we weep. You know, I don't like that. And Karen says, what's the matter? She says, you're always going camping on weekends. And, well, I won't go this weekend. See, now I feel pretty good. But 2 weeks later, Karen says, how about it? How about what? Camping. Oh, you're back to that again. See? So the point is, we rub each other because we tend to force our lifestyle on other people. And I would say that in some instances, it's useful to force your lifestyle on other people. If a person tries to paint a straight line with a very warped brush, you've got to say, well, you have to have paint that'll flow. You have to point out that would be significantly related. And if a person says, well, geez, you have to go through all that? Right. You have to go through all that to paint a straight line. I just as soon not paint. And so there are some people that will quit. They'll stop early. So you run into this basic problem with people. All right, one of the major problems that you run into with people is that the sexual patterns in different people differ, and they have different styles. And there are some people that fit in with any style. They don't have any particular style or any particular requirements. All right? I'm going to use somebody. I'm going to use you, Rosalind. Rosalind, this isn't true what I'm saying about Rosalind. But she gets her kick only if I touch her ear like that for 20 minutes. That turns her on. I said, I don't see her anything. But that turns me on. I said, well, oh, well. And I do that with resentment. See? And that doesn't turn her on at all. Because there I am mechanically doing it. You know what I mean? She says, that doesn't turn me on. Now, John does it like that. And that turns her on. So I watch John do it. And I read a book written by John. It says, twice this way and then once that way. And I do it so much like a student that she says, forget it. Okay. The Handbook of Sex is a pretty shitty thing. Because different people are sensitive in different areas and they have different requirements. And whatever their requirements are may be different than your requirements. You know, when somebody says, well, beat me up, that makes me feel good. I said, but I'm not mad at you. You don't have to be mad. Just start beating, you know. And so these people that have these different requirements, instead of saying to them, well, you and your strange patterns, the best thing you can do is try to find out what the other person's requirements are and just say, I can't handle it. Or I can make this adjustment. Or they happen to be parallel to my experience. In other words, it takes you many, many years to generate certain types of fantasies. And you get that from books, movies, and friends. And friends tap you on the shoulder and say, did you ever go out with a girl and have her dance nude before you had to? Well, that's terrific. It is, you know, nobody really knows anything about anything. So they put patterns in people. And those patterns are what they're stuck with. And they think they're real. And there's nothing that's real. If I rub the tip of your finger and that turns you on, there's no different than rubbing noses in Iceland. What the hell? Those people don't kiss and swap tongues, you know? No. They just rub noses. I can't see that at all. Well, I'm not an Icelandic person. I can't see that. But whatever people do is related to their background and pattern. Your problem is not to argue with anyone. Do you feel like going horseback riding Saturday? Not at all. So you get up, put on your breeches, and ride. Versus you going without me? Are you staying home? See, you're equal. How come you don't play with me for 3 hours before sex? How come you don't have sex right away? And forget about that. You're both right. Whatever your patterns are, if they happen to be close, you get along. If they're not, you don't get along. If you've been married 9 times, Arlene, it just means that there are not enough patterns in common. And so, some people are very fussy about a lot of things. Finding out their patterns may give you a lot of bits to stay away from. Looking for the good life, or a lifestyle that's pretty good, with another person is difficult, because you have to take their background in. So I would say that possibly the people of the future will learn to relate well with themselves. If you learn how to do that, and then the relationship you have with other people is a kind of a luxury in which you're extension of one another wherever you may be. But if you make an adjustment, meaning if you artificially take on a pattern that isn't naturally you resent it. No, whenever I pick up Karen and say, my mother's coming to live with us. No, Karen says, oh, how delightful. But my mother's a pain in the ass. And Karen says, you know, it has to be? And I say, yes, it has to be. I said, surely it's my mother. And Karen says, well, all right. Well, that kind of adjustment is painful if you don't like my mother. I don't like my mother. Well, how can you? So the point is, can you tell your mother, can you say no? Some people can't say no. They can't say no and they hurt themselves. And so the maximum adjustment that you can make is no adjustment at all. Find your lifestyle and live with it. Now, if you want to deal with a lot of people, you have to have the ability to alter your lifestyle. And some people do it automatically without pain. It's easy for them to do. And some people do it and they have tremendous pain that they have to go through to do it. So we would suggest that you go on and find out first who the hell you are, and the only way you can find that out is pretty much alone. Now, the alone bit is the problem. Most people don't have enough time alone. They're not put in a room long enough to develop patterns that they enjoy, whether it be ceramics or painting or music or whatever they do on their own. And some people have learned to live with themselves. They talk to themselves and they say things like, I don't think I should have made it this way. I think if I bent this and glued it on this way, they talk while they're alone. It would come out there, sure, that looks much better. See? Now, if you walk into the room when they're talking to themselves, it looks very strange. But when you talk to another person, in most instances you talk to yourself, if you think about it. Because when I go out with somebody, I say, sure, it's a nice day. And they say, yes, it is. Well, no, it isn't. And I don't talk to other people. I make noises. And they make noises back. Right? Think about it. Right? And I say, would you like to go for breakfast? That means I'd like some food. If I say, are you hungry? The other person, no, not particularly. So then, what do you talk to people about? What do you talk to them for? Why do you talk to people? Because we're conditioned to. We're conditioned to talk to people. Rarely, I've seen this, but I don't see it very frequently. I don't see a person sitting on a chair opposite another person for an hour and a half, and they say nothing at all. They say, how come you're not saying anything? Are you mad? They say, no, we have nothing to say. And that's very rare. And sometimes two people, sometimes they can go out and walk through the forest and not say anything to each other. They can just enjoy being together and sharing their experiences, and sometimes they don't verbalize a lot. And sometimes a person gets a kick in flying a kite. They really enjoy it, and they want to share it with you. So they say, come out and fly a kite with me. They say, I would find nothing more painful or boring. See? And they say, well, Linda might say, how do you like my Pinto? And I say, can't stand it. I don't like horses. I says, well, it's a beautiful animal. I says, well, then enjoy it. See? But I'm not mad at Linda if I say, well, look, I just don't see horses. And sometimes Karen says, I get 27 cats. And I says, well, I can't see cats. I got no use for them. Fur all over the place, a lot of noise, and I don't like cats. Now, Karen says, you don't like anything. Instead of saying that, say, well, can I adjust to that shit? And I live it. Do I want it? Do I need it? And this is the big problem that people have. They don't do that. They live a lie. They say, bring on your fucking cats. You see? They do things like that. And they say, and they do a lot of things. They do a lot of things sexually. And they do a lot of things which they're supposed to do. Because it says in the book, men like this. And I want to get along with men, so I'm going to do that. Now, it's very difficult to go out with somebody that you like, and they like something, and you don't do it. And they think you don't like them, or something's wrong with you. Now, if there is a pattern, a sexual pattern, whatever, well, you bite the ear or the tits, or you pinch the balls, or whatever you do, there's a pattern established, you see? And the pattern is a general pattern. Different societies have different patterns. And if you conform to that pattern, meaning if somebody important starts the pattern, then you're in. If your pattern is outside of that, then you're an oddball. Anybody that runs a feather around the nose for 20 minutes is an oddball. All right, so you're always dealing with patterns, and that's what the family is and children. It's a pattern. The patterns are established by society. What do you want? 2 kids. What kind of kid? Well, a boy and a girl. What's the girl for? I just like a girl. Now what's the boy for? He's a boy and she's a girl. Well, I think that if boys and girls are brought up in the same environment, identical environment, as near as possible, and they turned out very parallel in values, you know, you can saddle a horse or ride a horse or paint pictures or lift weights or whatever you want, or move a piano or get a crew cut or whatever you want to do. If the patterns are similar, then the boy and the girl thing doesn't have anything useful. There's not a useful or significant difference. I don't want to divide them up. I don't want to separate them. I don't want to separate the sexes. I would like to see them participating in whatever areas they can participate together, but without bringing them up so that one of them has a tendency to say, stand back, Mary, and I'll lift the piano. You know, I think that they both ought to be trained with a certain amount of physical ability, and they both ought to wear either high heels or no heels, or go through a life pattern that's most useful. And in that way, I think they can relate better. But I think if boys and girls were brought up together, and I think if they shared in similar values, I think that the future will probably generate bisexual people. And I'm not pushing a particular package that I have. I don't happen to be bisexual. I happen to be conditioned to go for women. And that's what society did to me, and I feel that I've been crippled. And I can't go for men. I just don't find anything in men. And so I feel that there's a prejudice on my part. And I can't make the adjustment honestly, because the prejudice is very deep. Therefore, I understand prejudice in other people. And if a guy reaches for me, I can understand that. I can't go along with it. And if a girl says, you know, get out the chains and tie me to the bed and all that sort of thing, I can't do that either. So I'm not broad-minded, because I don't know who the hell is. So I have these limitations that society had superimposed upon me. But I think if the future goes the way I'm talking about, so that boys and girls are together, brought up together, the same thing, I think they will fall in love with one another, and they will be bisexual and probably trisexual, meaning try anything, and they will do whatever they tend to do. And there'll be no limitations. And I think sometimes, in special instances, not now, but the future, maybe 5 men and 3 women may live together, or 20 men and 2 women may live together. But since they don't have a patterned lifestyle, and since they don't have areas of great differences, that communal type living might work in the future. But it won't be a promise. You will owe no one anything. You won't be obligated to do the dishes, but you will be obligated to find a solution. If you don't want to do the dishes, let's assume that we live together, Rosalie. Rosalie doesn't want to do the dishes. I say, what do you suggest? She says, I suggest, Fresco, a conveyor belt with all the dishes fixed to it. And when we're through eating, we press a button that goes under the table. There's a steam cleaner there, and they're stored. I said, what about the knives and forks? I don't want to do those goddamn things. She says, what do you suggest? I said, well, I don't know. She said, then shut up or find a way. Finally, Rosalie suggests a little wire basket with a knife, spoon, and fork in each one. And then when you get through eating, put them back in the wire basket, snap it closed, and it goes down under the table. Then I said, I don't like to eat with a goddamn conveyor belt moving by. And Rosalie says, what do you suggest? I said, I don't know. I said, so what do you want? She said, I want candles and a tablecloth. I don't want that conveyor belt. She says, all right. She says, I'll work it out so it looks like there's no conveyor belt. The plates move and they're all flush and you can't see anything moving and it's silent. She said, but I still think there's a conveyor belt under there. Well, that's a psychological problem. See, now you get into shit. I said, who's going to cook? She says, he doesn't like to cook. I said, what do you suggest? All the goddamn plates on the end of the day. Well, I said, look, Rosalie, we can have the stainless steel plate built in the table with a sheet of you know the kind of stuff that the Greeks wrap their candy in? It's very thin film. A sheet. So you eat your way down to the dessert. You start up here and you go right down through the plate to the dessert instead of all those plates. Rosalie says, I can't eat like that. Besides, she gives me a different fork for the desserts. I said, well, gee, the string bean's in the same place the dessert's going to be. And so if I stick the string bean fork into apple pie, what's wrong with that? Because you got a little string bean in your mouth anyway. It's unthinkable, Rosalie said. So she makes life complicated. This isn't true. She doesn't think that way. So I'm saying, can you eat your way down a dessert? Can you work out a pie that starts out with beef and winds up with cherry pie? You know, eat your way right into the pie of the dessert. Well, that's unthinkable. Arlene doesn't like it. Arlene doesn't want a fork at one end and a knife at the other end. She wants a knife and fork. She doesn't want a fork with a sharp end in the sense that she can cut her potatoes. She doesn't like the Presto shear system where I've got a very thin shear, well designed for cutting beef steak instead of dulling the knife on the plate. I have a shear that's thin and will cut the steak or the fish or whatever I want without squeaking along the plate. She can't eat that way. She wants a candle on the table. I says, I don't like wax vapor. It reduces cancer. All the hippies and naturalists always eat with candles and they don't smoke. And you got all that shitty wax vapor in the air. So, I said, look, Rosalie, I can produce an image of a candle in a glass thing and look like a real candle. You know, it isn't real. I said, what do you want? I want a real candle. I want a real fireplace. Well, if you make a fireplace that looks absolutely real, crackling wood, sparks shooting out occasionally, hi-fi equipment in the fireplace, crackle, burn, flare, blast of heat, everything like real, not cycle so you can predict it. Here comes the blast, here comes the sparkle. So you can't predict it. So you don't know the difference. The question is, should you tell your artistic, romantic, literary friend that it's an artificial fireplace? Should you do that? I don't think so. If they don't know the difference, if they're going to be bothered by the difference. Well, the question is, we have to ask ourselves a hell of a lot of new questions. What do we want? How far do we want to go? How mechanistic do we want to be? Mechanistic meaning you have to pretty much know what you want, and at least know what you want for the moment. And when you don't want it, you have to be able to say to the other person, I don't want it. And the other person says, you never want anything when I want it. I always say, Karen, let's go for a walk. Karen says, tonight it's so hot and stinky. I said, well, you never want to walk when I want to walk. And the idea is to recognize the fact that Karen doesn't want to walk and I want to walk. So I go for a walk and I come back in 2 hours. I said, Karen, let's sit down and write music together. She says, not tonight. You know? And we always get into a hassle. 2 people get into a hassle. Now, here's a terrible thing that's never been done. They have never opened the cranial case of a human being and shoved in 2 separate brains. You want to see shit. I'll show you what would happen. 2 separate brains are shoved in, and there's a membrane between them. Okay? Now, here am I sitting on this chair, and I've got Rosalie, part of Rosalie's brain, you know, and the Fresco part falls asleep. And then the Rosalie part wakes up and starts scratching my nose, and she wakes me up. I says, must you scratch the nose now? I says, I was sleeping. Then Rosalie's got one eye open because the other half of the brain controls it, and she's reading a magazine. I said, do you have to turn the pages? There's so much noise. Well, here we are walking, and pretty soon this light starts going off, and I said, what's the matter, Rosalie? She said, I want to go over there. I said, yeah, but they got the new cage over there. I want to see the Komodo Island lizard. He says, oh, you and your lizard. So that's called confusion. And there are a lot of people with multiple brains. They have all kinds of values. Go out and get laid. That's a sin. You shouldn't do that. After all, he is married. So was she. So what happened? We got all these arguments with ourselves. He said he loved me, but he doesn't send any mail. He doesn't write. Hadn't called me in 3 months. But he said he loved me. He must love me. He said so. And you go on to, and you nothing but conflict, because you have all that bullshit in your head. Now, one person with one brain has 9 brains. Remember the talk of 3 distinct personalities in one person? There are 50 different people in each of us, and they're all full of shit. And so, that's why you have conflict. You have conflict because we are all these composite structures. And so, the day Marianne, Joanne, I forget, Marianne and I get along real well. This isn't true. But sometimes Marianne says, I love you Saturday morning. And then on Sunday I put my arm around her and she says, oh, isn't it too hot? So I don't even know. Neither does Marianne. Depends how she feels. And so what happens, people's feelings change, and you don't know what adjustment to make, especially if they're temperamental. Meaning their feelings change a lot. A temperamental person's feelings change a lot. And it's legitimate that it change, because they consider warmth and friendship a great thing. And if you're too involved in something you're doing, and you forgot to say hello when I come in, so you could at least say hello. That's all I ask. You want a glass of water? Nothing. Well, why not eating the newspaper when I come in? And that was a terrible thing she did. See? And the point is that she was so involved in the newspaper, and I'm so glad that she was so involved receiving whatever stimuli she was receiving, that she didn't even notice me coming in. I'm a good friend of hers. So I'm so glad that she was so pleased getting that wonderful sensation. There she was, painting like mad. And I come in, she says hi, and was right back to the painting. That means she's involved, enjoying herself, and I'm so glad to see that. You could have at least held out your arms. This is fresco. I'm so happy to see you. So people get into the habit of putting down the brushes and making adjustments to somebody else. And so they resent that. And they don't know it. And over a long period of time, they blurt it out occasionally. You and your goddamn paintings. You think more of the goddamn oils than you do of me. You see? And we get involved in that kind of shit. And so, the answer, briefly, is that you can't straighten it out. But you can straighten out your own personality in this sense. By saying, Fresco, what do you want to do today? I said, take a long walk along the beach. I said, you going to do it? I said, yeah. At the end of the day, I've done nothing. Well, I do this. I thought you were going for a walk tonight. Well, it was hot. People came over. Then it got cloudy. So you say, you don't put yourself down for anything. Don't say, I'm going to paint tomorrow. If you want to paint, paint. If you don't want to paint, put the fucking brushes down. And then we say, well, I should have at least painted for an hour and a half. I should have done this and I should have done that. If you get off your own back, because some of us have lived with people on our backs. And those people make demands on us all the time. You get on our back, and they say, to the right. And they ride us all the time. We have so many things we're supposed to do for the other people. And so we resent that. Now, can people really work those things out? I honestly believe that they cannot. They can only relate in some areas for some period of time. Beyond that, it's not possible. Unless you have what some people call no personality. Here's the thing. That means you haven't got self-identification. You haven't found a self. The self will be fucked up, but that's the self that you find. So let's assume you have a self and you jump rope and you play the harmonica. That is what you tend to do. And you spin coconuts off trees and you break them and you cook conch on the beach. That's yourself. That's what you like to do. When other people come into the picture, they demand that you do other things. And if you're brought up in an environment where you had to get your reinforcement by other people being pleased with your behavior, you surrender, this is in quotes using old language, you surrender the self, which had never come into fruition, because you always had to answer to other people. For instance, if you have a boss, I want you to type this, when you do it, that, do that, then you marry your husband, you know, you take the kids out to the beach, then when you get back, call my mother, do this, arrange the flowers, and nobody can take care of this shit. There are some people that have been under the dictatorship most of their lives, and they have no self. So they come into an area, and the guy says, all right, this is what we're doing this weekend. And he packs their bags, and they do it. That kind of person, when the other people disappear, they sit there, aren't they? Because they got no self. And they wait. They sit by the door. And when it opens, they become alive. Well, Sam comes in. But to come into your own and find out who the hell you are and what kind of self you have, and living that, that is the experience of enjoying life. I'm using that in quotes. Enjoying life is finding what you are and living in accordance with that self. But the self that people surrender for the acknowledgement of other people is where they don't seem to remember anything. Let me tell you something strange about that. If I live for the well-being of everybody in this room, I have to make a different adjustment to each person. And then on the end of the year, you say, what did you do Saturday? What did you do Saturday? I don't remember doing anything. Because all I've been doing is making adjustments. My mother said, why don't you study law? All right. I went to the university. My father said, law? Don't you want to be a fireman? I said, all right. So I studied to be a fireman. And he says, chemistry is the coming thing. I now study chemistry. She says, are you taking any drama courses? No. She says, that'd be fun. When I go down, I take drama courses. And so I wait for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. There are a lot of people who just don't know what to do with their life. And there are a hell of a lot of people that have been directed all their lives. Somebody grabbed by the shoulder and shoved them around. And they don't feel it anymore. And so they got two empty shoulders, and they don't move, like a wax museum, because there's no shoving. And I'm suggesting that it's a hell of a lot of fun to start shoving yourself. Wherever the hell you want to go. Get in the water, stay there. Arlene says, you're going to be in the water all the time? And yeah. You've been in for 2.5 hours. She's talking about herself. She doesn't like water that much, obviously. But she impresses me. And I come out of the water, it's very hot out of the water and uncomfortable. But she's pleased. You know, something's wrong, but I don't know what the hell it is. And I can't say, oh, fuck you, and get back in the water. Now she thinks I'm mad at her when I go back in the water. And I'm worried about Arlene being mad at me. I don't want her to be mad at me, so I don't go in the water. So here you have this prison. The prison is the brain graft. So here we have people that exist today with a split down the middle of the brain, and I better go back to that cat so you understand it better. Some years ago, they did this with cats and dogs. They split the brain, and they put a membrane in between, like celastic, very thin membrane, a special kind of rubber. And what happened is they opened the eye of the cat, they kept one eye covered, or a dog they did this with. And they conditioned a dog to be well received by a particular individual. And that person fed them and all of that. Then they covered this eye, and the other person yelled at him and beat him and didn't feed him. The same person with this eye on. All right, all you had to do is put a flap over the eye, and the dog with his tail when it sees Arlene. If you cover this eye, it barks. It's very angry at Arlene. And so all personalities are built of that kind of thing, unfortunately. Now, there is no basic personality to anyone. Because sometimes you say, I'm not in the mood. And the mood changes. It has to do with body chemistry, it has to do with nutrition. And so mood doesn't depend on the psychological outlet alone. It has to do with heat. At 130 degrees, I think, anybody here irritable at 130? All right. At 130, all you do is take it on with a feather and they'll kill you. All right. Or annoy them. Or a fly on their nose becomes an elephant on the nose. So it depends on your irritability levels. And so since people have that, and they always look the same, they don't always look irritable. And so it's hard to tell. So again, what adjustment do you make? None. You make an adjustment to yourself first. If you can't do that, you get sick. Here's what that means. You'll get along with me, Arlene, if you make the adjustments to get along with me. But you'll get an ulcer because you negated yourself. You think you know what I mean by that? The self is, when I go to, this isn't true what I'm saying about Arlene, this is what you're new here. Arlene hangs curtains on her window, like that, with a big ribbon on it, like that. And I don't like curtains, see? And Arlene, this is the Arlene who I know. And Arlene likes to serve food with candles on the table. I don't like that. But when I come, she leaves that out, which means she negates herself. And if I force that upon you, I am cruel to force that upon you. So long as you live with curtains in your house, your way, and don't say, presto, there's no curtains in front of those blinds. You know what I mean? And I don't see a picture of your grandmother and your children, your own children on the wall. You know, and all your fucking baby pictures and all the family pictures, you know, where are they? So long as you don't force that on me, we can get along. So long as Arlene doesn't take me onto that roller that thing that gyrates around and throws people off the side. Arlene loves that stuff. I don't get a kick out of that. So long as she doesn't force it on me, we get along. What should we force on other people? How much force should we use? Well, this is how you use force and where you have to use force. If you buy a chicken farm, Karen, you got to hire people that are going to feed the chickens. People that feed chickens. So if you hire an intellect, so what the fuck am I feeding chickens for? I think I'll light a cigar and enjoy the day. Let the fucking chickens care for themselves. But Karen can't eat unless those chickens come in. So hire people that are not great intellects and sit around and discuss the nature of chickenness. They should be feeding chickens. Hire pinheads. And Karen does that. She exploits people. You always exploit people. There's no other way. If I hire a girl to type for me, saying, here she is typing like me, what am I doing this shit for? It's hot, I think I'll go swimming. I says, after all, I says, how can we operate as a corporation if you go swimming every day? There's a lot of letters to get out, and she feels that that's reasonable and true. Fortunately, they got to her. The stinking system poisoned her. So she does that because she feels she should. And of course, she's getting paid for it. And I'm the boss. I said, now I'm going away on a 3-month cruise. Take care of everything. And I don't feel any guilt. She doesn't say that fucking boss going away on a 3-month cruise. Because she has the problem. And she has a lot of problems because of this brain split, like the cat. Only human brains split into so many different areas that this area that's making the adjustments all the time gets tired. The only area that gets tired. So Arlene's been adjusting to everybody in this room, especially me. She always wears that big hat, because that's what I like. And then at night, she goes to sleep. And that's the adjustment. So to live with me, she's got to make all of these fucking adjustments. And this is how the brain looks, actually. And at night, the mechanisms that keep Arlene from behaving are the most tired. They let go. She's got the big hat on my head, shoving it right down. She's jumping on my head in a dream, see? And she's kicking the shit out of me. And you, and everybody else that she makes adjustments to. And at night, those areas are relaxed. So all day long, those adjustments that we make, that thing called good manners and good behavior, the little adjustment we make builds up resentment. And it expresses itself in the moments of tenderness, whatever that is between people. When people are tender and warm to each other, the cumulative resentment at that time comes to its maximum expression, where people do not behave a certain way because they've accumulated resentment. Now, how do you work that out? Well, the only way you work it out is you find the pattern of the other person, and you make an adjustment and agree to live with limitations of pattern and less adjustment. You're going to build resentment there, or you break, or you split, without name calling. Can't live with Rosa. No, I can't live her. Beans every night. You know, she likes beans. And the point is that you don't ride the other person. If you find yourself riding another person, saying, you know what the trouble with you, you find yourself doing that, that means that you got a hell of a lot of compartments in your head, and you don't have a self. And what you're doing is, I blame you for all the inability I have to find a way, a lifestyle that's pleasing to me. I said, if it weren't for you, you know where I'd be today? Top of the Empire State Building. And you say, why don't you? The lifestyle that you like. Okay. Some of us here have come off and felt, well, we ought to do something constructive with our time instead of sitting around brooding all day. So they buy themselves a little thing and they make something. But they don't quite finish it. For whatever reasons. They find when they're making it, they don't get that much of a kick out of it. So they leave it half finished. And they walk away feeling, I'm a non-finisher. That's what I am, a non-finisher. And then he gives me a pep talk. So I buy some clay and start something, and I make a bad eye that day. I don't have any talent, and I walk away with 500,000 projects not finished. And I carry that shit. And so, if you're a non-finisher, here's what happens to you. You go to bed that night, and you lie down, and you don't sleep. There's a lot of shit you didn't finish. And so you do another thing. You roll over facing the other direction. Maybe that'll do it, which is real shit. And you go, you don't know what the hell it is, but you haven't finished certain things you're supposed to finish. You haven't dealt with it. Because I don't say you should. I just say there's some people that have been brought up to finish something, and they don't finish it. So they don't sleep well. And the next day, they take on more things, because God damn it, they got to finish something. And they've taken on 4 new things which they haven't even started yet. And now they build more shit, and they become conditioned not to sleep. And so they keep one eye open at night, and they think about how they ought to square things away. And they say, well, I'm sure I can sleep. They do this intellectually. And they lie back, and they wait, fall asleep. And maybe my underwear is a little tight, and they loosen it. The pillow is too high, and they pound it down. And then they lie there. Now the pillow isn't high or anything, and they feel that they ate a little too much that night. They feel a little pressure here. Well, that isn't that bad. And they let go of that pressure, and they smile, and then they can hear the blood moving through their blood vessels. One of them getting a heart problem. And they begin to listen to that fucking beat. Boom, boom, boom. And they hear swish in the ears. Some people do. And they let go of each thing and pick on something else. And so, what happens is, when you don't finish something, the ability to do this takes a long time. You start on something, you say, I'm not in the mood. I'm not going to finish it. But you don't owe a finished thing to anybody. You know that real well. You don't owe anybody anything. You owe yourself equilibrium. And with that, you can do the most. Even though you're a non-finisher. You're a professional non-finisher. Now let's talk about psychology from the point of view of this particular viewpoint here, which is essentially mechanistic. Arlene is a professional non-finisher. This isn't true. Okay? So she's got 27 products. Rosalie is a finisher. She'll start with photography and finish every fucking photograph, have it framed on the end of the day. We call her a compulsive photographic finisher. Just as bad as Arlene. Doesn't do anything but photograph. Okay? Everybody is equally fucked up whether you finish something or not. Because what are you supposed to finish? You're supposed to be like a dog. The dog walks through the forest, then he sees some leaves on it, and he walks. He doesn't say, well, wasn't I going that way? He just walks the other way. Then he sees some stick, and he sniffs at the shit. The other dog goes, how can you sniff at shit? He says, watch me. And he sniffs at it, and he doesn't worry about it. Then he'll head off to the left, he'll lie down, hear some rustling in the trees, he'll get up. And man doesn't do that. He's lying down, so what am I getting up for? I should have called my brother-in-law. And he's got 10 million things he should have done. And we always admire a bird, because there it is flying that way, and suddenly it soars off this way, and pow into the water, and comes up with nothing. It doesn't say, shit, I missed that fish, how have I been a little... None of that shit. Just flies out. There's another fish right after it. If he gets it, just, I got it this time, boy, that was really worth... No intellectualizing. Intellectualizing fucks up people real badly. And you can learn to head toward the water because it's a beautiful day, and if it's too cold, head right out. And say, boy, it's too fucking uncomfortable for me. Then go in, swim underwater, you see barracuda, get the hell out. Don't worry about Fresco. He said, what are you afraid of? Just get out and enjoy it. The idea is we make so many different kinds of adjustments that are not necessary. Very few animals in nature have any problems, at least according to George Washington Cryle. He said that all animals in the zoo, all of them, have tumors of one kind or another. Interesting. And most of them are sick. And most monkeys are sick, even in nature. They're nervous, undernourished, moving around all the time, jumping around, get excited. There's something violently wrong with a hell of a lot of chimps and monkeys. They lack something. And it isn't natural for them to be like that. It's just that their environment doesn't provide certain things for them. And their lifestyle is haphazard. And so man, or human systems, have to be able to make that particular adjustment. You start on something, you want to write a book, and you only get 3 pages done, and you really don't want to go on, set the pencil down, go out, do something else, or do nothing. That's the proper adjustment. So when you're sitting back, slouched, and the whole day is going by and nothing's happening, that's happening. Because that's what you want to do. Now, if you get up and say, I should be doing something, this is a sickness I'm talking about. If later on you want to do something for whatever occurred, you do it. And if you're not motivated, you don't. And it's that simple. Now, if you want to go out there and make a lot of money and do, then you have to do a lot of things society wants you to do, with resentment.
Talk to me about that. Why? I've heard a lot. Like, if I felt like lying down one day and somebody says you need to tell me you didn't do anything all day, why do people hassle you because you're lying down in bed all day and you're comfortable doing that? People hassle you because you haven't done anything all day.
Okay. There are professional hasslers. They walk around and she's got green hair. How come you got green hair? They need some kind of shit going on all the time. And there are people who look around. My God. You're wearing sandals that went out of style in 1927. They have nothing to do. And you say, I don't think they went out of that. And that's it. That's the excitation. Makes life interesting. The reason they do it is like a movie, a writer. He's got a movie with 10,000 people on the beach. If he ran the movie all day, just showing 10,000 people on the beach, the camera covered everything. They were eating chicken soup and ice cream, going in and water. The movie wouldn't work out. Nobody would stay. So what happens? Somebody starts screaming in the water, and the shark is there. And then the audience loses hope. Because they're conditioned to excitation. That's what a football game is. Let's assume a guy got behind the bat and hit the ball, and it went about 11 miles out of the stadium. You know what I mean? That's the end of that. You know what I mean? Every time the guy got up there, he did that. Or a fighter got in the ring, and he went, and the guy was flat. Right like that. Finished. They said, well, it's the greatest fighter in the world. Yes, the ring was on, and the guy is finished. They wouldn't have that guy in the ring. They called him, even if he weighed 73 pounds and had no muscles at all, because the event is too simple. Now, if I paint your room black, there's no lights in it, all the furniture's black, the rug is black, furniture, the drawer knobs are black, flat black. There's no visual stimulation. I'm not saying it's needed, but people said it was needed. They said you got to have color in the room. You can't live in a black room. You know, if the human body were all white or all black, the person would go crazy. That's why there are yellow dots on the face. There's a sort of people look like that. They have zigzag lines on their face. Because nature put that there so that we'll look interesting. But imagine a face being just a blob of skin. Nothing else there. See? And the body had one hair growing in the middle of the chest. Just like that. And I said, well, that's very uninteresting. Is a face interesting? It's visually exciting. For what, though? In other words, it's very hard to decipher what it is that man or human beings are like. They are not like anything in particular. They suffer because society is already established and superimposes established views upon you. And those views that you try to live with don't work. And there's no adjustment you can make, no person you can meet that can take you out of that. Someday we said, well, gee, maybe someday if I go to India and meet a wise person, they'll take me out of that. Well, maybe if I can find myself, I'll come out of that. You can't find yourself because the self is changing all the time. You see what I mean? So whatever self you find is obsolete in the next 2 years. So stop looking. Remember Diogenes, who lived in a barrel and he was looking for an honest man? He was a schmuck. Because there's no honest man. There's no honest nothing. And if he walked over to a mirror with a little lamp, he said, well, there's an honest man. He assumed that honesty was something in particular. There can be no honest people. But if you wanted to meet somebody who's absolutely honest, you come into the room, they fart and they belch, and they just don't have any inhibitions. You say, well, I don't want them that honest. You know what I mean? That honest. We can't live with it. So we have no adjustment we can make, except to whatever systems we have. Okay. Now, let's say that I do something real dumb. You make a pie and I don't like it, and I throw it on the floor. said, hold on for a minute, jump on it like that. And then I think about it later, I said, Jesus, she took the time out to bake a pie for me. She didn't know that I wouldn't like it. She did her best. At least I could have said, well, gee, I deeply appreciate it, but it isn't the kind of flavor. He said, why do you throw it out for a jumping? Because I'm a schmuck. Because there's an area in my brain that's completely undeveloped, that area. And now that I've jumped on the pie, I've awakened the area that makes me look like a schmuck. And I tell you that. And then you say, oh, then you realize that. Is that right? But I got 27 of those areas, so hang on. Instead, we resent it, and we make no real adjustments to it. And so when you're fucked up in many areas, there's nothing wrong with it. It just means that that's the way you are, that's yourself. Now, if you can live with that, it's very strange to be able to live with that. In other words, let's assume that Rosalie starts weeping now, because I didn't phone her this week. She starts weeping. And if I light a cigar, I say Rosalie is back in the weeping side. And, you know, and then Rosalie says, you never read poetry to me anymore. I said, no, I'm not going to read poetry for 3 or 4 months now. And I smoke my cigar. He says, don't you care? I said, don't bother me. I'm not interested in that subject, Rosalie. He says, who do you think you are? I like my cigar. If I didn't respond to those things at all, Rosalie would get very sick. And so what happens is, I put my arm around her, I said, it was very inconsiderate. I said, I'm an inconsiderate person in this area, Rosalie. And she says, well, and I said, look, here's another area I'm inconsiderate in. And this area can expand on Wednesday if I don't feel too good. I says, you want to live with that shit? She says, let me try it for about a day or 2. And then she says, no, it's too much shit. That would be great if people could learn to do that. Instead, they do the other thing. And this is what they do, symbolically. Now, I've always had a habit of walking like this. And Rosalie wants me to walk like this, straight. See? And I slouch all the time. She studied physical ed and posture. And she said, Fresco, put your jaw together, you're drooling, you see? And she got me sitting up like this, see? And she got me walking non-Fresco style, and my muscles hurt. Because when you get conditioned to walk like that, that's normal to you. And everybody walks perfectly well for their physiology. It's hard to believe. If I were born somewhat asymmetric, and I walk like that, that's symmetric to the asymmetry of my structure. And if I sit like this, that's the way I feel in general. And that's normal. So slouch if you must slouch. But if you want to make an impression on people, if you want to be a model, if you want to be accepted by Mademoiselle, then walk like that. Walk like this also walk. If you want to be a ballet dancer, you have to go to school and you have to dance. You have to get up on your toes and go up. Get up there and dance any way you want to dance. People would enjoy that. I think they would. I think if you had a little bit of song, just moved around any way you want to, which is a freestyle, maybe you can call it interpretive dancing, just get up there and run the way you run down the beach when you feel good. When you're out in the forest, you don't count your steps. You don't try to land a certain way and not fall over. Because you just run and you see a tree and you jump up on it and you climb up and you hang and you let go, whee, and you fall on your ass. That is natural. That's you. When you have to time your dance, when you study ballet, music, and the orchestra leader goes like that, ta-ta-ta, and everyone's working like mad, that's bad. That's the sickness of art. The sickness of art is that it's regimented as hell. And the artist thinks that the mechanic, the machinist, the scientist is a precise guy. Bullshit. You ever watch Swan Lake? What work? Or 10 million girls in a chorus line, you know, coming behind and then running out again? Or the Olympics? Some poor bastard up on a bar, whacking their gut and doing your handstand, timing everything for a lot of sadistic sons of bitches out there. If they miss, they write them off. Fuck those people. Get out and do gymnastics, run along the beach, do a backflip if you like it. If you fall on your ass, try it again. Dive off the board. If you land on your ass again, try it again. Don't do it again. But don't get up there and time everything to please everybody out there. Because one day, you're going to miss the bar. I don't give a shit how much you study. And when you do, the Olympic people, I dislike the Olympics intensely, as many other things that I dislike. What I would like about the Olympics is if everybody did what they did and they all got medals because they were so great. Because they all tried to do whatever they could do as best they could do. And this is great. I don't like sailboat racing because I try to cut in front of you and block the wind from getting to your sails. You know, if I could do that, I can bring my boat in. And you come on, Fresco, bring it around, block those something like this. And I do that, and I cut in front of them. They don't get any wind when I come in first. What shit? Stop trying to beat anybody. Stop trying to time art, because once you time art and time ballet, it's not as enjoyable as it is in freestyle. Those of you, is there anybody here that can ice skate? Can you raise your hand? Ice skate doesn't take too much show. You know, you just lean and you go as you go. But when you perform on ice, then it's time, and it isn't as pleasurable. So you had most fun when you were a kid, running and moving in random fashion, and less pleasure when you regiment the routine. That's why experimental work is so fascinating, because you don't know where you're going next. You make something, or free art, where you make something, and then you add something to it. And you discover things as you go. That discovery is part of the greatness, great pleasures of life. But if everything is too regimented, like a medical doctor or a dentist, for example, which I always use, because I find dentists to be insufficient in so many ways. A dentist has to do the same thing so many times that he doesn't remember being alive 11 years ago, because he drilled out 8 million teeth. It's the same fucking routine. Unless he found a triple tooth or something interesting, or one tooth on top of the other, 27 teeth, something different. It would stimulate him. But there he is, drilling away like mad, which I'm very much against. And so I'm against any rigid, structured routine. And even in architecture, it should be wild and exploratory and a search, a constant search to better the system. And when you better the system, let it go and go on to something else. But don't become a professional hair cutter. Set the style, keep moving in different directions. And that is my definition, in quotes, of being alive, to set the patterns different. But if you set a routine, you lose that sensitivity of being alive. Now, you need not agree with the things I'm saying, so fire away if you have any questions. You think you know what I mean when I talked about art and the way I talked about it? Does it bother you? Okay, any questions? We generally go to Rinoli's for coffee. If you want to join us, you're welcome to do so. The fee is $3 for non-members, it's $1 for members. Yes?
How is it that you said before that deep resentments are maximized, or they're expressed to their maximum when you're sharing your tenderest moments? How does that come out?
The moments of tenderness are artificial. If they're accommodating, where you accommodate to the other person. You know, when you're not being yourself, this is the old expression, be yourself. That's the way you have to behave around certain people, because you must be there for whatever reasons you resent it. That's what I mean.
I just thought of being tender as being yourself.
Well, if people are that way,
Artificial
that was
tenderness.
artificial. I always refer to it as that. You're inconsiderate when you're considerate. That's what. It's only when you're being whatever you have to be. Yes, sir.
Doing what you do whenever you feel like doing it, but in many ways it's a contradictory system, because of the idea of building up work habits to accomplish a given goal, to move on.
Yes.
So if you don't have those work habits, you can keep prolonging work.
You know that, though.
Yes,
So
I
you
do.
know that. Once you know that, then you start with a work habit, because you're starting for another goal. And that would be natural to you, because you've now accepted that. Before you've accepted that, it would have been much easier for you not to read the mechanistic conception of life if it annoyed you, or made you, if you got uptight reading. You know what I mean? Set it aside. And if you felt you're religious and this view threatens your religious feelings, you just come to the meetings and keep your religious feelings privately, because you need them. And at a time when you no longer need them, you will shed them when you're ready to do it. But if you say, well, Jesus Christ, you know, I don't need you anymore. I don't need Jesus Christ. If you do it because it's the in thing and it isn't really part of your nervous system, where you're accommodating, you resent that. That's what I mean. You will find your own yielding. You will yield when you're ready to yield. I can't make you yield any faster. I'm sorry I didn't get that across, but I'm glad you brought that up.
This is when, like, once you start practicing a given system, and it starts...
And you know why you're doing it.
Well, that comes later, so it seems.
Yes.
And then it becomes integrated into the nervous system.
That's it.
Then this there is...
Exactly that. All these bullshit sessions that we have here, all they do is bounce in your in, bounce out. It's when your nervous system undergoes change through the putting to use some of these principles, then you undergo change. If you don't put them to use, if you live the same way and just keep coming here, nothing really happens to you. And if you really want an easier lifestyle, you will make a decision at a certain time, which will be automatic. Try certain things. Shall we go?